Blair-funded Muslim network has been encouraging NHS staff to convert to Islam. More on that in a moment. Also tonight.
Well, we've always been positive about the prospect of a youth mobility scheme with Europe. We think that has great advantages for British people, young people wanting to study, work and travel abroad, and we actually would help our economy.
I spoke to that man, the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey. He supported an EU youth mobility scheme, something many have called a Brexit betrayal. Also,
Donald Trump is dangerous and wrong, and I'm deeply alarmed that people like Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch seem to be muted in their criticism and at times, frankly, have been cheerleaders for Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
yes, that's right, you heard that clearly. Donald Trump is dangerous, says Sir Ed Davey, as he blasts Nigel Farage for supporting him. And
So what is a woman?
what is a woman? The question of the age. Find out the answer to that question later. And
several farmers down here on Whitehall concerned about farming, concerned about food security and trying to raise awareness right here in the heart of Westminster.
that's been a tractor on Whitehall today, and I went down to a wartime-themed protest which aimed to highlight threats to the UK's food supply. Spoke there also to the Shadow Farming Secretary as well as some farmers. Well, I, of course, want to hear your thoughts on all of this. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. Now, let's get your latest headlines with Katie Bowen.
Christopher, thank you and good evening. Your headlines at 7:02. Some breaking news coming into us from Sweden this evening. Police say that 3 people have been killed in the city of Uppsala in an apparent shooting. Police are now searching for one suspected perpetrator, a news agency in Sweden is reporting. Police said that they were called after members of the public reported noise that sounded like gunfire in the city centre. A large area has now been cordoned off, with investigations at the scene ongoing. We'll bring you more on that breaking story as we get it. Elsewhere, Reform UK has committed to launching a national statutory public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal in its first month of government. Making the party's first legislative pledge, leader Nigel Farage says a national inquiry must happen. Labour peer Maurice Glassman has joined forces with Nigel Farage in a cross-party group to back the parliamentary bill that calls for a statutory inquiry. Lord Glassman said that the British public expect action so the police and other services finally get a grip of this disgrace. GB News also understands that many Labour MPs have given their support to the bill in principle. A 38-year-old man suspected of carrying out a crossbow attack in Leeds has died, counter-terrorism police have said. Owen Lawrence from Headingley was taken to hospital on Saturday with a self-inflicted wound after 2 women were injured on the Otley Road. Police have now confirmed that Mr Lawrence has died in hospital. Police also confirmed that they are not looking for anyone else in connection with the attack. Mr Lawrence's Facebook accounts are being examined as the investigation into what happened continues. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair has called for the UK government to change course on climate policy, arguing that the plan to phase out or limit fossil fuels is doomed to fail. He also added that the current climate debate is riven with irrationality. Mr Blair said that Labour should focus less on renewables and more on solutions like carbon capture, adding that people were, quote, being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. Writing in the foreword to a new report, Mr Blair went on to say that net zero was losing public support. Sticking with net zero, Downing Street has said that suggestions that a reliance on renewable energy contributed to blackouts in Spain and Portugal are unfounded claims and speculation. Power supplies have been returning in the 2 countries after large parts, including the capitals Madrid and Lisbon, were hit by a huge outage yesterday, affecting millions of people. Portugal's grid operator said extreme temperature variations had produced a rare atmospheric phenomenon that caused the cuts. Irish rap trio Kneecap have now had their performance at the Eden Project in July cancelled. That comes after one member of the group appeared to call for Tory MPs to be killed, and another appeared to shout "Up Hamas, up Hezbollah" in historical gig footage. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have arrived on the Isle of Mull as they celebrate their 14th wedding anniversary. William and Catherine, styled as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay when in Scotland, are visiting the Isles of Mull and Iona to celebrate and connect with rural island communities. The pair were married 14 years ago today at Westminster Abbey. Those are the latest GBNews headlines. Now let's go back to Christopher in Westminster.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, GB News can exclusively reveal that a taxpayer-funded Muslim network has been encouraging NHS staff to convert to Islam. A guide circulated by the NHS Muslim network, and it's here, described conversion as the best decision you ever make and lays out the steps to become a Muslim. The material, found on several NHS Trust websites, is presented as a training resource. Staff are also urged to take part in an NHS Ramadan challenge, fasting from dawn to dusk to show allyship. I'm very pleased to be joined right now in our studio at GB News by GB News Originals editor Nick Dunning, who brought us this exclusive story. Nick, what have you found out?
So the NHS Muslim Network has created a guide for conversion to Islam. In the guide, they talk about the rules that you must abide by as a new Muslim. They talk about how you should deal with family members who disapprove with this decision. But as you said in your introduction, they also talk about how it would be the best decision you ever make. Now, this guide has been circulated generally among NHS staff. It also sits on an NHS training website for One Trust. Now, they also talk in the guide about challenges such as celebrating Christmas and Easter when this is no longer a ritual of yours, how to deal with socialising. You know, they're saying that going out to pubs and bars is not seen as halal and that it actually poses a risk to modesty. And the issue with this, Chris, is a lot of Brits don't have any idea that anything like this is happening. When I spoke to people in the street, they were frankly baffled. I also spoke to a long-standing Islamic scholar and Muslim chaplain within the NHS, Dr. Sheikh Ramsey, and he said that anything that could be seen as spreading your religion in the NHS is wrong. Take a look.
What is the matter with the British people? What are they pandering to?
What has religion or spirituality got to do with medical care? Like, I know that there's certain practices, like Jehovah's won't take blood and things like that, but what's it got to do with? It's everyone's individual thing. That sounds very bizarre, to be honest.
I don't think religion and politics should come into healthcare. To me, it's a neutral ground.
No, not at all. That's wrong. That's not the spirit of Islam. That's not.
So Sheikh Ramsey, he's worked for the NHS for a long time. He says, you know, chaplaincy can be a good thing, but the issue is that when it comes to religion in our public services, there's a line.
And do management know the NHS about this?
Yes, so all networks within the NHS have to be sponsored by executives, top British civil servants. And there's a number of networks. There's a Christian, a Jewish, and also the Muslim. Now, I have sources that are affiliated with the Christian network, and they tell me they're not aware of any literature or anything like that that is being produced by their network. There's also the NHS Ramadan Challenge, and that was sponsored by top management as well, who said they were going to take part. They called on all NHS staff to fast from dawn till dusk, not eating, not drinking, to show, quote, allyship with their Muslim colleagues. Now, sorry, just to finish, I've not seen from the Jewish network or the Christian network any invitations for non-Jews to fast for Yom Kippur or non-Christians to do anything to do with Lent.
So it's aimed at non-Muslims?
It seems that way, yes. And the guide does talk about conversions. Now, we can't be for sure whether there was any conversions that took place, but what we do know is there's a massive focus on increasing allies. They were actually congratulated by NHS management on the fact that they'd done so. Now, an ally is a non-Muslim who is affiliated with the group and furthers its aims. It's actually got to the point where there's so many people going to their events that they've outgrown the venues.
It may be that the NHS is trying to inform a largely Christian workforce about dealing with Muslim people and having sensitivity towards Ramadan and fasting periods and their faith. Could be what's behind this?
I mean, it could be. The reason that there are networks in the first place is that it's in order to comply with the Equality Act. Now, we know that when that came in under the outgoing Labour administration in 2010, that there were all of these protected characteristics, so sexuality, disability, religion, and so the networks were created as a result of that, so that the people can band together and start to advocate for their interests. And they receive time and money on the NHS's dime in order to further their aims.
Do you know how much money has gone into this network or even the other networks?
So they haven't been very forthcoming with that information. What we do know is that there was an FOI done back in 2022 and the Muslim Network did receive over £2,000 in that year. But they also are entitled to 2 days a month per member of the network to work on those on those duties. So the issue there is that there's a lot of resources that are funded by the taxpayer that could be going into this, and that's when it does become in the interest of the British public to know what's going on so that they can make that judgment.
Perhaps treat all faiths equally.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the NHS have given a comment to GB News, haven't they, Nick?
Yes, so an NHS England spokesperson said, senior NHS England managers regularly engage with staff across the entire NHS workforce to hear and understand their experiences of working in the NHS in order to provide better care for patients. We are a diverse country and that is reflected in the NHS workforce. It's vital that we make sure our staff feel included so we can recruit and retain an NHS workforce that is as productive as possible. And they go on to say, it is obviously entirely reasonable for NHS staff to take part in Ramadan if they'd like to, including as a way to recognise the tens of thousands of Muslims working in the health service.
Well, thank you, Nick, for bringing us that story, and great to see you here on GB News.
Thank you.
Up next, I spoke to the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey. Amongst other things, I asked him how he was celebrating Donald Trump's first 100 days as president, and whether he thinks trans women are really women. That's after the break.
On Thursday, the 1st of May, voters across England go to the polls.
In a series of council elections,
mayoral elections, and one crucial by-election.
They'll vote on the local issues that matter to them and let the parties know where they stand.
We'll be here throughout the night.
Live around the country.
as the first results come in.
And from 6 a.m. on Friday morning, as it all becomes clearer, we'll be here to discuss what it means for you.
Vote 2025, the people decide, from 11 p.m. on Thursday.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are we witnessing a crisis in motherhood and in parenting more generally? From American singer Chappelle Roan making the headlines for saying that none of her friends with children are happy, to this piece from The Telegraph where an anonymous woman admits to regretting having children. There does seem to be a current trend of talking parenthood down.
Joining us now is the Professor of Family and Parenting Research at the University of Kent, Ellie Lee. Ellie, how much of this is due to cultural factors, and is it just really about the bottom line costs of parenting?
No, I don't think it is just about costs. Mothers particularly, but I also think men as well, are finding it harder to see how you give meaning to this experience. The Telegraph article I thought was very interesting. I mean, there's some points raised in it about the ambivalence of motherhood.
What really struck me about this piece in The Telegraph was where the lady says she had this difficult labour, 47-hour labour, and then all she could think of afterwards was, can someone please take the baby away so I can sleep, until it dawned on me that I was responsible and I had to get up. And isn't this the heart of the problem, that in times gone by, extended family and friends surrounded a woman after she'd given birth, taking all the other responsibilities of life off her so that she could focus on her physical recovery and on looking after after the baby. And that was normal for thousands and thousands of years. And now just suddenly we expect a woman who's just gone through a really biologically difficult process to just get up and do it all and carry on.
I think that's very true. I mean, that whole narrative is extremely lonely. And what you get a sense of when you read it is that she feels very isolated and there's not much around her, which is helping with this. And it's it's a really pat phrase, it takes a village, but it does take a village.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, earlier today, I spoke with Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey ahead of the local elections on Thursday. Sir Ed Davey, thank you for joining us on GBN Tonight. How are you celebrating Donald Trump's first 100 days in power?
I'm deeply alarmed by his record in just 100 days. The damage he's doing to the world economy, to jobs here in the UK, to businesses, to exporters in the UK, and then what he's done to the security of our country, our defence, the support for Ukraine, where he many times has seemed to have sided with Putin. This is really damaging to the world we knew. I've always been a strong supporter of the relationship between the UK and the United States. I'm a big fan of our relationship with the States. Have traditionally been our closest ally, but I don't think he's a reliable ally in what he says and does.
What do you think the victory of Mark Carney says to you about your position on Donald Trump? You've been explicitly against him from the very beginning. It's almost propelled Carney into power as a moderate, as a centrist in Canada. Does it make it more likely that you might be Prime Minister at the next general election?
Well, let's first of all congratulate Mark Carney and the Liberal Party in Canada on a tremendous success. What a huge turnaround. And I think that's because they have stood up to Donald Trump. I mean, what he said about Canada is outrageous. Canada is one of our closest Commonwealth allies. And I said in the House, you know, when we were fighting fascism in the Second World War, Canadian, American and British troops stood shoulder to shoulder, fighting, looking after each other. And that history and that important Commonwealth tie, where King Charles III is the head of state for Canada, I've always felt that we should stand up for Canada, whoever's against them, even if it's the United States. So I celebrate the victory, and I would say that it does suggest that many people, almost from whatever political persuasion, here in the UK and elsewhere, share the Liberal Democrat view that Donald Trump is dangerous and wrong. And I'm deeply alarmed that people like Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch seem to be muted in their criticism and at times, frankly, have been cheerleaders for Donald Trump and Elon Musk and this
also
quite dangerous...
I mean, isn't it a case, though, that those politicians recognise the value of a special relationship? Isn't that more important than your antipathy towards one man?
Look, Liberal Democrats really value Britain's relationships with the United States. And in the past, we've had people who have been there who haven't shared our political views, but we've gone along with them because of that important alliance. But I'm afraid when the facts change, you need to respond to them. You need to be tough with someone who is against Britain in terms of our economy, in terms of our defence, and we need to call him out. And the fact that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer hasn't been tough enough, I deeply regret. I think he's wrong on that. Because I think if you stand up to bullies like Donald Trump, that's the best way to take them on. And what we've talked about is, like the Prime Minister's rightly done with a military coalition of the willing to support Ukraine, Liberal Democrats have called for an economic coalition of the willing to defend our economy and to promote free trade across the rest of the world, and so we can stand up to Donald Trump and say we have alternatives. We're not going to have your bullying where you divide us and separate us. We're going to stand together.
It's the first time we've spoken to you since that Supreme Court ruling. Do you know what a woman is now?
I absolutely do. You know, as the Supreme Court has said, in law, a trans woman is a woman except in respect of the Equality Act. And the Equality Act is clear, and I totally respect the Supreme Court's ruling. Indeed, I accepted it on the very morning it came out.
So what is a woman? I mean, are you saying that in certain circumstances it can be a trans woman?
Well, I'm saying what the Supreme Court said. I mean, I believe in the rule of law, and I believe backing the Supreme Court is essential. I know in some parts of the right wing, they don't like the rule of law, and Donald Trump treads over the courts. Liberal Democrats don't. We support them, and you know they're very clear. You look at in paragraph 24 of their judgment. Under the Gender Recognition Act, a trans woman is a woman, but in respect of the law, in respect of the Equality Act, that doesn't apply, where the gender is and sex is based purely on biological sex.
Well, GB News viewers think it's a simple decision. I mean, a woman is a woman and a man has a penis. Isn't it that straightforward?
Well, I'm telling you what the Supreme Court says. That's the rule of the law. Well, let me give you an example of how confusing this can be. Now, a trans man can't go into a gents' toilet. A trans man, according to this ruling, has to go where their biological sex is. So trans man has to go into a women's toilet, and that may be that trans man might have had a surgical procedure, might actually have a penis. So you can see how complicated it is. A lot of people want to talk about how simple it is. It isn't. It's a bit more complicated, as indeed the ruling shows. I've read the 88-page ruling. I want to tell you what I think we should happen now, because people want to know what the practicalities are, and that's the issue. We're going to need guidelines and a debate about how we take this forward. There are a lot of unanswered questions. How does it work in practice? How is it enforced? These are real questions. And what Liberal Democrats are saying, there should be debate in Parliament. We're very happy to engage in debate so we can get this right for people. We absolutely have to respect the rights of everybody.
Labour peer Lord Glassman, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, they're supporting an inquiry into the grooming gangs. Would you support an inquiry into these rape gangs?
We've been prepared to look at all forms of inquiry from the start, but what we've said, as well as looking at inquiries, the findings, recommendations of the last inquiry, which lasted quite a few years, should be implemented.
Baroness J.
Baroness J, exactly. She had an inquiry into child sex abuse, and unfortunately, even though it concluded a few years ago, the Conservatives, including Kemi Badenoch, refused to implement the recommendations of an inquiry. So very much open to future inquiries, but unlike Reform, unlike the Conservatives, we want the recommendations of the previous inquiry to be implemented. And I'll tell you why. We want to protect children now, and I'm afraid other politicians seem to not worry about children now. Liberal Democrats do. There are those recommendations, and we're determined to protect children now. And I just slightly wonder whether by failing to get behind the recommendations of the inquiry we've already had, some people are playing politics with that. I'm not prepared to play politics with the safety of our children and young people.
So far this year, 10,000 people have crossed the English Channel to get into Britain illegally. How would you stop the boats?
We have to stop the boats.
How would you do it?
It's dangerous. Well, I'm coming to that, but let me be really clear. Liberal Democrats have always said we've got to stop these boat crossings, and there's several ways that you do that. First of all, you make sure that if someone tries to come and claim asylum here, their application is processed really quickly, and then if they fail, they get sent back. You know, that's what's been lacking, a tough approach where we deal with these promptly and securely. The other thing we want to do is we want to make sure we're working with international partners really rigorously to crack the organised crime gangs. And, you know, the Conservatives completely failed to do that, and I'm not yet convinced that Labour's done enough.
What Labour's doing is not working.
Here's the point. I don't think Labour's doing it well enough. So if you look about how you cooperate with our European partners, obviously that's where the other side of the channel, you've got to look at the lessons from the Dublin Convention. You've got to look at things like European arrest warrants, and those tools that we had before when this issue wasn't a problem, before the treaty that Boris Johnson did with Europe.
What do you think of Home Office plans for a one-in, one-out returns agreement with France, allowing migrants in France to come over here and one here to be sent back to the continent?
We should look at all that. We've got to stop the boat crossings. The Conservatives failed dreadfully. They had a shocking record on it, and they wasted hundreds of millions of pounds on a scheme that was never going to work. They played politics with this. We've got to be realistic. Everybody knows that unless you tackle the crime gangs, unless you get people deported when they shouldn't be here, we won't tackle it.
How do you feel when criminals like drug dealers use the right to a family life under the European Convention on Human Rights to stay in the UK and not be deported?
You have to look at every case. There are some cases, and I've had experience in my own constituency, where people have tried to do that, and frankly, that's not a defence. When they've been the victims of some appalling crimes, and the person has tried to use the law to escape deportation. And so I've got a strong record on that. But the question is, why you can't generalise, Chris, is that every case needs to be looked at itself. So it'd be wrong for me to generalise, it'd be wrong for me to second guess the courts, but I have experience of this being abused.
We're hearing Sir Keir Starmer might allow a new freedom of movement agreement for 18 to 30-year-olds. Does that go far enough in terms of UK's reset with the European Union?
Well, we've always been positive about the prospect of a youth mobility scheme with Europe. We think that has great advantages for British people, young people wanting to study, work and travel abroad, and we actually would help our economy. But we've said that it should be modelled on the existing youth mobility schemes that Britain already has, with Japan, with Korea, with Australia and so on. And that's a cap scheme, and that's what we want to see. Let's see what the details are that the government comes forward, but Liberal Democrats have championed this. We think it's the right step forward.
Sir Ed Davey, Liberal Democrats leader, thank you for joining us on GBN tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was Sir Ed Davey speaking to me earlier today on the banks of the River Cam in Grantchester Meadows near Cambridge. It looks stunning, didn't it? Joining me now to discuss that interview is the former Labour advisor, Paul Richards. Paul Richards, thank you for joining us on GBN tonight. Great to see you there. He's done quite well, hasn't he, with his position on Trump, Ed Davey. We've seen how it might benefit Mark Carney. Might we see Ed Davey as Prime Minister in 2028 or 2029 because he opposes Trump and no one else does amongst mainstream leaders?
I think it's really interesting. We're on the brink of a by-election, the parliamentary by-election, and also a whole big set of local elections and mayoral elections. And in the normal run of play, the Lib Dems would be poised to pull off a real spectacular and gain loads of seats and probably gain the by-election. That's their stock in trade, isn't it? But they're nowhere. And I think in the by-election they may well come fifth. And it's also fascinating that you would think that the main opposition party would be poised to gain, hundreds and hundreds of seats and possibly pull off a by-election spectacular too. And the Tories are nowhere either. So we're in the midst of a week of campaigning where the only the main winner seems to be stay at home, to hell with you all, followed by reform.
Paul, We'll wait and see until the results on Friday when we can discuss them fully, I think. But for now, looking at that position of the Lib Dems, they have taken this firm stance, haven't they, against Donald Trump. And I wonder if that might increasingly benefit them, because people are feeling poorer in this country. Those with pensions and ISAs have seen the stock market tank since those tariffs came in, and that people have a view on Trump, and also not least what he says about groups.
Well, I mean, Trump is damaging British jobs and livelihoods now. That is true. But the British government is very different from being the leader of the Lib Dems, and he's got the ability to kind of articulate some of that anger towards Trump in a way that Starmer simply cannot, because he's representing our nation on the world stage. It may be to his advantage electorally, but these elections are about local councils. They're not actually about geopolitics necessarily. But he is positioning hard, and he does speak for many, because, as I say, they've gone from bewildered, I think, to angry as to what's going on in America and how it's now impacting on us and our own well-being. Starmer, as you can see from the footage here, is decided to, flatter the egotist in the White House and to get him on side and to try and mitigate some of the worst impacts of the tariffs and all the rest of it. And, in some ways that has been a successful strategy. And as Ed Davey himself said, the US is still our major ally, even if they are behaving in a erratic and perhaps not a very reliable way. In the long term, of course, they will remain a major ally for the UK. So that's why Starmer's doing what he's doing with the letter and the invitation to see the King.
Well, he's got to, but Paul Richards, he's got to, because whether you think of Trump or don't like Trump, and then my point to Ed Davey was the same, you've simply got to recognise the value of the US to the UK, and all other personal animosity falls away when faced with that importance.
Well, of course, that's right. I mean, it has to transcend party labels, and you saw that with Blair and Bush.
Yeah,
that
Bush,
caused all kinds of rows at the time because they came from totally different political traditions, just like Starmer and Trump. But the US and the UK transcends all of that, and they are our ally, and they are a trading partner, and we want to make sure that this tariff nonsense doesn't actually close down British jobs.
Paul, I must ask you about the issue of what is a woman. We had quite a legalistic definition there from Ed Davey. He said that trans women are women, and women are defined in the equality legislation. So he's trying to tie his language to that Supreme Court ruling, and then he wants a debate in Parliament about how that ruling should be applied. I think a lot of GB News viewers and listeners just tear their hair out of this. It should be pretty obvious. You have trans people going through difficult situations in their lives. They need some love and support and some kindness, but equally that can't impact too much on women. Isn't that the point? And I think they look at politicians dancing around it with legalistic language and just go, what on earth are they talking about?
I mean, you do tear your hair out. If I had any hair, I'd be tearing it out. There were, here we are yet again with senior politicians talking about penises and toilets, and it's just a bizarre national conversation around something that really isn't as important as the National Health Service or cancer or any of the crime or the big issues that affect people's lives. And I think the Supreme Court was very helpful. It was a very helpful ruling. It did set out very clearly how public policy should be pursued, and you would hope it would close down all this nonsense now. We can focus on something a bit more mainstream.
And just very finally, Paul Richards, next few weeks, I think the European Union, Brexit will come to the fore with these summits with the European Union leaders and other big moments here with UK politics. He seemed quite engaged, didn't he, by the issue of 18 to 30 youth movement. That's something which you expect to be agreed with the European Union next month?
I think it's been trailed, and I think it's likely, and I think it would be a good thing. People that voted for Brexit didn't necessarily mean that their kids shouldn't be able to go to Europe and travel. That's not what people meant necessarily. So I think, anything like that is just a practical solution is a good way forward.
OK. Look, Paul Richards, thank you for joining us tonight on GBN Tonight. Great to see you. Thank you for coming on the show. After the break, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announced his plans to block foreign sex offenders from claiming asylum in the UK. But a key loophole could still let some through. I'll be speaking to a former Conservative Attorney General about how this can be resolved next.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, this evening at 9 p.m, it's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and the star of that show joins me now. Patrick, what's on tonight?
Well, I've got loads on, Christopher, but one of the standout things is today is the day that Reform joined forces with the Labour peer to ramp that pressure up on Jess Phillips to have a national grooming gang inquiry. I spoke to Tory MP Katie Lamb. Now, I did ask her why the Tories had allowed so much immigration from Pakistan in light of this particular grooming gang scandal. But I also asked her about her views on Jess Phillips, and she thinks that Jess Phillips is letting down working-class girls. Here she is.
Test is what we do when we're in power, and by far the most important and impactful and positive thing that she can do for these victims and for the public who deserve to know the truth is hold a national inquiry. And as I say, if she's not willing to do that, then I think, unfortunately, yes, she is letting those girls down.
It's an incredibly punchy interview, Christopher. I'm going to be talking about all of that. I've also got Donald Trump's counter-terror expert, Sebastian Gorka, joining me to look at the president's first 100 days. I'm going to be examining whether or not Labour are being completely honest as well about the deportation, or should I say anyway, lack of asylum status for foreign sex criminals. I'm not sure we're being told the full truth about these European power outages. I wonder whether or not we're on the brink of a British meltdown. There, Manchester apparently has just ground to a halt in the last couple of hours due to some electrical fault. And should male doctors be allowed to examine female patients' breasts? All of that and more, 9 to 11 p.m.
It's a great show, Patrick. We'll be tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, welcome back again to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Foreign sex offenders are to be barred from claiming asylum in the UK under a new law announced today by the Home Secretary. The legislation will give ministers powers to block protection under the Refugee Convention for any foreign national convicted of a sex offence. But the Conservatives have criticised this measure, claiming that a loophole remains and it's in place for criminals to launch human rights claims to stay in Britain, and have called on the government to repeal the Human Rights Act. Yes, that all over again, on all immigration matters. Joining me now to discuss this is Sir Michael Ellis, the former Conservative Attorney General and a former Solicitor General. Sir Michael Ellis, thank you for joining us.
Evening, Chris.
On GBN. It's great to see you in the studio. What is going on here? All the roads always go back to the European Convention on Human Rights, and can we pull out of bits of it to make this work? Because why on earth these people can stay in the UK after offending here is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and it's, of course, the same old chestnut, isn't it? But I'm afraid I do think this is a bit of a stunt. It's a pre-local election stunt by the Labour government, and you can understand why they might use this timing to to introduce that stunt, but the fact is it isn't going to be worth the rather expensive paper that it's written on if they're going to produce a bill on this, because it won't work. And the reason why it won't work is because there are, frankly, multiple loopholes that will be left in place. We know that because it's not dissimilar to other attempts that have been made in the past. And unless you close all of those loopholes, the very nature of a loophole is that someone's going to go through the last one remaining.
So briefly, what are they? Because you are our most senior law officer in the last government.
That's right, and so there are multiple loopholes, but we all have heard, haven't we, of the ECHR. We've all heard of judicial review. We have heard of the mechanisms like those that you see under the Refugee Convention and, of course, the Human Rights Act. So they're the same old chestnuts that come up again. Labour are saying, well, under the 1951 Refugee Convention, we're going to change this, that and the other. But the truth of the matter is that there's a reason why that convention dates from 1951, and it's only been a problem in the last 10 or so years, and that's because of the way that 51 convention has been interpreted. So it's
by courts?
By courts over the recent years, particularly over recent 10, 20 years. So the same convention and the same ECHR applies to other countries in Europe, Italy, Greece, for example, but they don't have the same judges who are actively interpreting legislation that exists in a way that is so favourable.
So are you blaming, and it's a big deal because you're a KC, you're a King's Counsel.
Yes.
You're a senior barrister. You know, often barristers all club together and defend judges, but you're saying here it's activist judges undermining what frankly should happen anyway.
Well, I don't blame judges because I blame politicians. Because
but you are. You're saying it's the same laws in France and Italy and they apply differently.
And ultimately, of course, what that means is that it's up to politicians to legislate to close off loopholes that judges can use. That's why, ultimately, because you have a sovereign parliament, Parliament is responsible. And if they don't like something judges are doing, it is up to politicians to stop the judges.
And we can remove ourselves from elements of the European Convention on Human Rights, because often we see offenders saying, I've got a family here.
That's right.
My right to articulate my right to a family life is then overrules any attempt to remove.
But of course, these post-war, many of these conventions that we adhere to were post-war conventions which were designed to protect people who were suffering great hardship and had suffered enormous hardship under the Nazis, for example, and fascists in World War II. But of course now, over the course of the last 80 years, and we're coming up to the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, over that 80 years, now the human rights have been interpreted not in the same way as they were 80 years ago, but now if they don't have a mobile phone, for example, if they're not given a mobile phone, their human rights are being breached.
We think back to Abdul Azizi, the Clapham chemical attacker, who was given asylum in the UK under your government. By the way, let's not forget that, despite a previous conviction of sexual assault. I think under your government anyway, but certainly under governments here, despite a previous conviction of sexual assault. What they're doing here, what Yvette Cooper's doing here, then, is you can exclude foreigners convicted of sex offences even if their sentence is less than 12 months. Before it was over 12 months. That is tweaking it, but is that enough?
It's tweaking it. It won't be enough. It won't be enough, because what will happen is that clever lawyers will find a loophole around it. They might, if they don't find the Refugee Convention helpful anymore, they'll apply the Human Rights Act. If they don't like to apply the Human Rights Act, they'll look at other provisions of ECHR, and they'll simply use another loophole to jump through.
Parliament's got to act, in your view, and that means removing from elements of ECHR.
Well, exactly, Chris. We have a sovereign Parliament. It is ultimately up to Parliament, it's up to politicians to have the nerve to do robust things if they really want to stop this.
How would that look internationally by pulling out parts of the ECHR? We lecture other countries, China, Russia, on human rights issues, but if we pull out of the ECHR, they'll just say, well, what are you up to then?
We were adhering to human rights, frankly. We were adhering to proper human rights in this country long before most countries in Europe were even democracies. We were doing so, 100 years ago. We gave defendants the right to speak up for themselves. We did, clearly, we have led the way internationally. And I think those who catastrophize this and say, well, if we derogate from various pieces of legislation, we will suddenly become totalitarian. Well, I'm afraid that doesn't hold water.
Because the point of Brexit was to give power back to MPs in the building behind you on the screen there, back to Parliament.
They've got to use that power.
And use the power.
Yeah.
And they don't want to. And
that's it, Chris. They've got to have the backbone to use the power.
But you didn't do it, did you? I know you left office in July last year. Well, you personally, but you corporally as a government.
Well, I think, look, you know, we are where we are now. But
why didn't you? Because you feel this now passionately. I get that. Why not do it when you're in power?
Well, of course, my power is rather limited, Chris, if we're talking about me personally. But you make a perfectly reasonable point, which is that whoever the politician is, whatever the political party is, the only way this is going to be dealt with is if someone says robustly, we've got to close off these judicial review loopholes, and it's patently obvious to all your viewers that that hasn't happened up to this point.
There's a political price, and Reform or other parties who are in government benefit from this, I think, against both Labour and the Tories.
Well, that is clearly, you know, what has been happening, but we do need to face the reality that these are complicated matters, but I think ultimately we've got to respect the will of the people. That's something that has not happened, and it's clear what the will of the people is now.
Sir Michael Ellis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris.
Tonight, indeed, on GBN tonight. Great to see you here. Now, coming up next, I went down to a wartime-themed protest which aimed to highlight threats to the UK's food supply. And I spoke to the Shadow Farming Secretary and some farmers who are worried about keeping food on our table. Stay with us.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Whilst it's sunny and warm in the UK, it's very windy in Greece at the moment. It stays windy on Wednesday, showers in Cyprus, and also a spell of rain moving through Portugal, heading into Spain. That's going to be fairly heavy with gusty winds. Dry ahead of it for Barcelona, and for Italy, a pleasant day to come on Wednesday, but we keep the strong winds through the Greek islands and this area of showers and thunderstorms moving into Cyprus. It all settles down much more later this week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Been a cracking day today, if you like, sunny weather in spring. And, well, guess what? There's more to come tomorrow. If anything, slightly warmer, all thanks to this chunky area of high pressure dominating our weather, allowing the sun to do its thing and warm things up day by day. There is a weak weather front across the far north of Scotland. It's not been sunny here all day. Quite a bit of cloud, and that cloud thick enough for a little bit of drizzly rain to return to Shetland through the early hours. But elsewhere, it's a dry night, maybe a little misty. Temperatures dipping away in the east, turning quite cool here down to single figures. But further west, a very warm night actually, particularly parts of Western and North Wales, where we may see temperatures holding in the mid-teens. Pretty unusual for the end of April. There's a bit of a breeze which will continue to blow along the south coast, New Hampshire down to Cornwall, but otherwise the winds are pretty light. Any mist and fog will disappear very rapidly in the morning. Some thicker cloud again over the Western Isles of Scotland and over the Northern Isles. Maybe the odd shower here and there, potentially over Caithness, particularly through the afternoon. But most of Scotland, most of Northern Ireland, England and Wales having another blue sky day tomorrow. And yes, it will be the final day of April, seeing those temperatures lifting higher and higher, probably the warmest day of the year so far, likely to get widely over 20 degrees Celsius. Well, we've got a bit more cloud across northern Scotland, temperatures maybe in the teens, but elsewhere, I'd say over 20 degrees, and in the south and southeast, 27, maybe 28 degrees Celsius. It'll be another warm one in the south on Thursday, but further north a change. A weather front moving in, bringing much more cloud, a little bit of light rain, maybe the odd heavy shower come the afternoon over the far south of Scotland, perhaps northern England. Small chance of a shower across central parts of England and Wales too, but here generally another very warm day, maybe peaking at 29 Celsius, but it will be turning cooler by Thursday across the north.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Coming up next, I went down to a wartime-themed protest in Westminster, which aimed to highlight threats to the UK's food supply. And I spoke there to the Shadow Farming Secretary and some farmers who are worried about keeping food on their table.
With me now in Whitehall by this war memorial for the Royal Tank Regiment, along with a vintage Massey Ferguson tractor, is Liz Webster, who's a beef and arable farmer. Liz Webster, why are we here?
Because farmers and people involved in food production are acutely aware of the dangerous situation that we are in for food. We walked into this actual similar situation in World War II. We are being told, and we're seeing events globally, that war is becoming more likely. The government recently told us that they needed to save British steel because war was likely and we needed British steel. And what we're saying is, look guys, food is in a really precarious position and it's being taken for granted. Food was replaced as a priority by the environment in the Agriculture Act, which only mentions the environment, not food. And so we are sleepwalking into a war situation without adequate food supplies, and that's very dangerous. And the last time we did this, it ended with the government directing people in cities to euthanize their pets because food was so short. And that is a little known story that we're deeply sad about. But that's what we're trying to evoke, because the government are being cloth-eared, not listening to any of us, and they are directing more harmful policies towards agriculture, which puts all of us at risk. You saw events in Spain yesterday. It will be a million times worse.
Liz Webster, thank you for joining us today on GBN Tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
With me now is Victoria Atkins, the Shadow Agriculture Secretary. Victoria Atkins, campaigners here are giving out ration books, aren't they? Ministry of Food books. Here's one for you to see. We're by a Second World War memorial, by a vintage Massey Ferguson. They are concerned, aren't they, about food security. Now, in the big debate on farming, we know about the tax impact on farms, but is food security as big as an issue?
It is an enormous issue, and the message I try to get in every interview that I do is that this doesn't just matter to family farms and rural communities. It matters to all of us because we all eat food. What I'm worried about is that the measures we're seeing from this Labour government, whether it's the family farm tax, whether it's enhancing compulsory purchase orders for local councils in Natural England to seize farmland, whether it's the taxation that's driving lots of businesses to the ground, all of these measures are making what is already a tough industry even tougher, and for some just not survivable.
At some point, people like me, journalists, will stop putting it on you as a Tory government, but you were in charge of 14 years. Many of these policies on set-aside land, on rewilding, were established when you were in power.
Well, if I may, on the SFI scheme, which at the risk of getting all techie, is the scheme that we put in place to help both nurture our countryside, because as a Conservative, I want our countryside to be in an even better state than that which we have inherited. But after Brexit, that gave us enormous freedom to do this. And so we were working with farmers to get SFI in place to ensure that they were not only being paid to grow food, but also for the public good they do, such as preserving hedgerows, such as
SFI.
SFI's Sustainable Farming Initiative. And what's so criminal, and I use that word, is that this government stopped that scheme late on a Tuesday night without any warning. So farmers who have already been investing in these environmental measures, have already been trying to, reflect the public will that we look after our countryside whilst we feed ourselves. Labour has just stopped that dead, and that is unforgivable.
Thank you. Victoria Atkins there with a warning about food security in this country.
That's a protest earlier today organised by Save British Farming to highlight the deepening crisis affecting UK food and farming, and they want to get that looked at and addressed by people like Victoria Atkins. Now, coming up next, State of the Nation with my friend Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. So, Jacob, you're here with some gifts.
I am. I fear the Rees-Mogg even when he bears gifts. But this gift is a wonderful Bath Oliver biscuit, which I think you're going to show to the camera.
I'm showing the camera there. You see that? This is a Bath Oliver.
Bath Oliver biscuits are the king of biscuits. They are the most delicious biscuits, indeed the only biscuit for eating cheese with, particularly Somerset cheddar. They've been the mainstay of my diet since I was a schoolboy.
Yes.
And the dreadful company that makes them, that has one of those funny consignia-like Play-Doh, seems to want to get rid of them, which is a great pity because they're enormously popular. They are a sort of high-quality gentleman's biscuit.
They brought in to treat gout in the 18th century. Do you have gout?
You see, I don't have gout, and that's because I've eaten Bath Olivers all my life.
So, surely players do say that it's a much less biscuit, but people's changes and their tastes have changed, and they are very sorry. We're out of time.
Bad enough already.
Coming up, State of the Nation, but first, the weather. Here's Alex Deacon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Been a cracking day today, if you like sunny weather in spring. And, well, guess what? There's more to come tomorrow. If anything, slightly warmer, all thanks to this chunky area of high pressure dominating our weather, allowing the sun to do its thing and warm things up day by day. There is a weak weather front across the far north of Scotland. It's not been sunny here all day. Quite a bit of cloud, and that cloud thick enough for a little bit of drizzly rain to return to Shetland through the early hours. But elsewhere, it's a dry night, maybe a little misty. Temperatures dipping away in the east, turning quite cool here down to single figures. But further west, a very warm night, actually, particularly parts of western